On July the 1st, the organization known as Society of St. Pius X is scheduled to ordain 4 of their priests bishops. And in the particular Catholic realm, there's a lot of discussion about this because they don't have the approval of Rome to do this. Let's begin there. I want to break this down. I'm not going to give you one question. I want to have you talk for 30 minutes. Strictly from the Catholic standpoint, why is it wrong for priests to be consecrated bishops without the permission of Rome?
Because that is schism. We want everyone to be in union with Rome, especially the bishops who are the successors of the apostles. It is essential that there be this unity, and this consecration is an obvious act of schism because the Pope is not, again, Pope with air quotes, this is not approving of them. He hasn't sanctioned them, and so they're doing this in spite of him or against his wishes. And so it is a serious crime that they are committing. And again, because they recognize this man as their Pope, and they are defying him, it is schism. So they're breaking union with the man that they call their Holy Father, that they recognize as their Pope, their leader, but they are being defiant to him. And so that's what is wrong with that. The consecration of bishops is not evil. It is actually a good thing. It's the fullness of the priesthood, the sacrament of the priesthood. So it is the fullness of that sacrament, but it needs to be done in union with the rest of the church. So the church is not splintered and sent every which way. The Pope is there as the center of unity, and if it's done against his wishes or without his approval or authorization, then it is schismatic, and they are rebelling.
Okay, let's open up the can of worms now. They recognize Rome, these modern popes. They always have. But we know very well that they don't obey them. How do you justify that?
I can't. There is no justification for that. It's like acknowledging that you're my superior, but I don't have to obey you, or you're my parent and I don't have to listen to you. I can do whatever I want. And sadly, that's the world that we've come into, where children are rebelling against their parents, and parents are afraid to discipline or correct their children. And it is, you might say, bled over into the religious realm, or this church realm, where these men are blatantly defying the one that they claim they must obey. And so they're not Catholic.
Two-part question. Do you think that Leo will excommunicate them? And do you want them to be excommunicated?
Well, in my mind, they're already all excommunicated.
Okay.
They're outside the church. I don't recognize Leo as a true pope, so I think that's the modernist, the Novus Ordo. Mm-hmm. They are not Catholic, so that is not the church. So are they outside the church? My simple answer is both parties are outside the church, and it's an argument, a theoretical argument, basically, from where I stand, because it's non-Catholics arguing over religion and practice, and it is indifferent. But the problem is they're all claiming to be Catholic. And the Society of St. Pius X claims that this man is their pope, but then they are being disobedient, and not only disobedient, I say defiant, because they've been warned, don't do this, and they're going to do it anyway.
If Leo were to excommunicate, do you think it will affect the membership in this organization?
I do not think so, because I think the people are already hook, line, and sinker drawn into them. It seems to me among so many traditionalists, the blinders are on. As long as they say the Latin Mass, that's all they want. And Bishop Lewis would say they all belong to the Latin is lovely club. We don't care whether the Mass is valid. We don't care whether it's licit. As long as it is in Latin, and Latin is lovely, that's all we care about. And so I don't see that there's going to be a loss of membership. When I was younger, I would have, and many times I thought, oh, when they do this, the people are going to wake up. And but I guess I've grown a little callous over the years, Father. And
not sure I would call it callous. I would call it more realistic.
Realistic.
And a better understanding.
Less idealistic, maybe. Hopeful. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would hope that the people would wake up and say, if he's our Holy Father and you're not obeying him, then I don't owe you any obedience. What are we doing here?
You and I have lived this for many, many years, and we have seen the duplicity of this organization going back to Archbishop Lefebvre, who really initiated all of us, and it continues to this day. They're the largest of these so-called traditionalist groups, and yet they are probably the most scandalous of all of them.
Definitely the most scandalous. This, what is it they call it now today, the social media, the recognize and resist.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's our Holy Father, but he's not holy. He's a heretic. He's a terrible man, but he's the Holy Father. It is so blatantly contradictory. I don't know how people can't see it, but it seems that the blinders are on, and we don't care about doctrine. We don't care about morals. We just want what we want, and we want a pretty Latin ceremony that makes us feel good so we can go home. Now, that's exactly what the Novus Ordo wants. That's what the Protestants want. They go to church not to become better, but to feel good about themselves. I know. It's a broad brush that I've just swiped across there.
No, I'm pausing because of our long history. I say our, your, mine. In our community, it's a long, long history going back to the early 80s as a community. And so we have seen this nonsense take place over and over and over again, and yet it's going to come up. And what's interesting about the 4 men that have been chosen, they're all seminary rectors. There's an American, 2 French, 1 Swiss. That had to be done by design.
Yeah.
And basically to incorporate the episcopacy within the seminaries and do it in such a way to where you push this into the next generation, which is really frightening. But nonetheless, these are the decisions.
Yeah. Well, the whole organization is a sham, in my opinion. It's just they have their seminaries and their training, but their seminaries are no different than the Methodist seminary or any other Protestant seminary. I don't doubt that the young men are taught some truths and they learn some very wonderful things, but the problem is that knowledge without the corresponding love and faith it's empty, it's meaningless.
And obedience and humility.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how intelligent people are, or how great they can argue, or how beautifully they can offer a ceremony. None of that means anything if there's not any integrity. And right off the bat, they're showing they do not have any integrity by their recognize and resist. There's no honesty there. There's no integrity.
There's another element that's part of this too. They talk about tradition over and over and over again. Yet when you go back to 1983, when there are 9 priests that left that organization because they were presented with 3 or 4 different things that were going to change, and of course they rejected that. And I'm going to focus on the changes. I hope I can remember this offhand here. The first was they were going to begin to say the 1962 Mass, which is more commonly known as the Indult Mass today. They were going to begin to use the breviary and the Missal of John the 23rd. Okay? They were going to accept the Novus Ordo ordinations, and they were going to accept the Novus Ordo annulments. Just on that, your thoughts as far as compromise versus maintaining tradition.
Well, obviously they're not maintaining any tradition. Of course, I jokingly say to people sometimes the only tradition they recognize and observe is the tradition of sin and disobedience, of anarchy. But I don't see that Lefebvre was offering, the Society of St. Pius X was offering anything from God. It was, in my opinion, a scam from the beginning, a plant to draw the Catholics, or at least those who wanted to be Catholic, away from solid doctrine and to become this ethereal, the Mass is in Latin is lovely, and that's all we want, and we don't care whether the priest is valid, we don't care whether he is licit, we don't care about any doctrine, we don't care about any morals, as long as he has a nice ceremony for us, and we can go home and feel good about ourselves, that's all we want. And I've had so many lay people tell me, I am not a theologian, and I can't make a decision, which basically they're putting on the salve so that they can stay where they are without change, because I don't want to know the truth, because truth means I'll have to do something. I want to stay where I am, and the Latin is Lovely Club. That's where they are.
Historically in the Church, when you look at the founders of different religious orders, almost to a person, men or women, they've been saints. Mm-hmm. So there's been a holy foundation, a holy person involved, a solid foundation. When you go back to the beginnings of this organization, Society of St. Pius X, they were initially given permission to function in the Diocese of Freiburg, Switzerland, as a pious union. Mm-hmm. By 1975, that had been revoked, and then a year later, Archbishop Lefebvre was suspended from ordinations and taking part in any ceremonies, solemn ceremonies. I don't remember the exact word. And of course, all of this is ignored because all of us continue. He continued to do it until he died. To me, well, of course, we know this. This is old news for us. But when you have such an organization built on lies, obviously it's not from God. Mm-hmm. It means nothing in the eyes of God, because you can't have an organization that's built on this fraud, and you compare it with the religious orders and congregations of the past, where you basically had saints who began these foundations, these orders.
Well, I would say even in addition, and maybe perhaps even more importantly, these orders were given papal approval. And because the Pope, when he speaks of matters of faith and morals and dogma, it is infallible. So this is a mark of the Holy Ghost, that those orders, societies that have been approved by the Pope, true Pope, are true organizations, and they exist in the Church. I recently wrote that these organizations do not exist in the Roman Catholic Church. Nowhere has any true pope recognized and approved of the Society of St. Pius X.
Yes.
Yeah, and we could go down the list of so many traditionalist groups and organizations that have set themselves up. They do not have the a standing approval of a pope. They do not exist. The church has never recognized them. The church has never established them. These are just individuals in a very Protestant type mentality who set up their own little church, their own little fiefdom, and dare anyone to contradict them.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate, because you're going to get a lot of traditionalists who are going to say that they couldn't go to Rome, and therefore they think it's justified. What's your response?
Then you must go to the bishop. You must go to some successor of the apostle to receive that approval. But if you're saying this man is the Pope, then you have to go there. Don't tell me you can't. It's one flight away. Just get on an airplane. You can be there. You can communicate with, you probably won't get a personal audience with the Pope, but you can connect to Rome and the agents there if you're really determined. If he is your Holy Father, you have no right to do anything without his approval. And if you can't get to him, then the next thing is you go to his bishops, the bishops that are in union with him. Wherever you are, you go to that bishop. And you need that bishop's approval to operate in the diocese because he is the successor of the apostles if you're following Catholic doctrine. But most of these traditionalists, they don't care about Catholic doctrine. They don't care about tradition. All while they say tradition, tradition, they don't care about tradition because traditionally you cannot establish anything without the approval of your bishop. And if you want it to be international or go beyond one diocese, you need the approval of the Pope, the universal jurisdiction. And if you don't get that, you don't exist. If you got the local approval of a bishop, you exist in that diocese, in that bishop's territory, but not throughout the world.
Okay. Any traditionalist that hears this is going to ask the question, what about the Franciscans? How do they justify themselves?
Well, the Franciscan order was established by St. Francis of Assisi, and when he had just a few members, they walked barefoot to Rome to get the approval of the Pope, which they received verbally, and later they've got it in writing, that the Franciscans they exist, we were established, we are approved by a Pope, a legitimate Pope, and sent throughout the world with this papal approval. So the Franciscan order does exist. We personally, as Franciscans, we had Bishop Louis Vazelis, who was a Franciscan before Vatican II, made solemn vows, was commissioned to train Franciscans and bring them into the order. Originally, he was sent to South Korea to do this, but when the Novus Ordo came into practice and it became impossible, he came to the United States and set up a friary, and that is where we come from. We do exist in the Catholic Church.
Okay. I'm playing devil's advocate purposely a little bit here.
Good.
Okay. Because I know the questions that would come and have come. Okay. Some of these traditionalists think that Bishop Louis founded the community. Explain the distinction here.
Oh, well, I don't know if you have to define the question. Are you insinuating he founded the Franciscan order? No.
Founded in the sense of because he founded this community, therefore he needs approval.
No. As a Franciscan, he already had his approval for the establishment of Franciscan community, which was given to him in his work in South Korea, which I mentioned he wasn't able to do. So in his return to the United States, by that time, the there was no more a legitimate authority. And so he has to go back to the legitimate authority and the command that he was given to establish the Franciscan friaries and train men to be Franciscans.
Is that from the Minister General?
From the Minister General, yes. Yeah. His orders were from the Minister General out of Rome, the highest authority in the Franciscan order.
Okay. Back to this erroneous organization known as Society of St. Pius X. Do you think there's going to be any fallout from this?
I think there will be minimal fallout. I think those who are loyal to the SSPX, the Society of St. Pius X, will remain there. They've got their blinders on. This is where they want to be. I would think that there is enough intelligence, or the people would have their eyes open enough to recognize that you're saying one thing and you're doing the opposite. You're saying this man is our Holy Father, but then you're blatantly disobeying a direct order. And of course, they're going to justify it in whatever semantics that they can dress it up with. But I do believe that most of the people, because they're without the grace of God, and they've basically renounced their intelligence, and I made a comment about our education earlier in this program, how much intelligence do they have? How culpable are they? That's for God to judge. But I really think there's many people, they can't see the simple and honest truth. They're deceived by their pride and vanity. And I often think of the children's story, the Emperor's New Clothes, where the seamstress comes to town and builds this magical clothing for the king that can only be seen by the good. And everybody in the kingdom is praising the king as he's walking down the street in his new clothes, and a simple little child cries out, "But he's naked." Everybody bought the lie. Everybody went along with the lie because they didn't want to be the one who stood out and was different. And sadly, that's how so many people are manipulated. The devil entraps so many. And I think those who are following the Society of St. Pius X, which in my mind doesn't exist, but they're following this fictional organization. I shouldn't say it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the Catholic Church. If you want to consider them Protestants or whatever. But
it's a legal 5013C, no doubt.
Yeah.
Legally, but in the Church, they are a fiction of their imagination.
Yes. And so they don't exist, and those are already there. They don't want to see that the emperor is naked. They want to believe the lie. Oh, that's a beautiful new suit that the emperor has, new clothes.
It would seem that when you look at the bigger picture, we know that the Novus Ordo is nearly destroyed itself. Some would say has already destroyed itself. And now he's been working on the so-called, air quotes here, traditionalist movement now for 50 plus years. Satan has been pretty successful in misguiding souls, fooling souls, destroying what's left. And there's the question, what's left?
There's very few people that are united with true bishops because there are very few true bishops in the world. And the bishops have to find some good priests and prepare them to take over in their stead. But hopefully, someone asked me not too long ago what I see in the long run. I said, well, if Christ doesn't return pretty soon, I see that God's plan should be that we find more true bishop or true priests who are truly obedient to their bishop and are truly Catholic. And among those, we ordain some to be bishops. And when we get a sufficient quorum of true Roman Catholic bishops, then we can hold a conclave and elect a true pope. Honestly, I don't see that happening in my lifetime, but I can put forth the seeds that are there. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this program, or towards the beginning of this program, it seems to me we are in truly apocalyptic times.
Okay.
And the faith has grown.